Hopefully, just let me know in the chat box if you can't. And what have we got here? See how many we've got. Okay, so that's all good. We've got another minute or so to go. The meetings, the recording has started. I'll get ourselves ready for this, get the code ready. Start with volume 2. I think I've got volume 2 here. Let's have a look, lovely little look at the cover. Volume 2. And we'll get started in a minute or so. Well, actually, I see now it's 5:30, so I think I might make a start. We've got about 50 or 60 online, so, and the meeting's started recording. So I'm going to go back to our lesson tonight, and I just need to talk to you about a couple of things to make sure that we're all on the same page and that everybody's all good for the next however long we need to be, and also till we see each other on the other side. Are we allowed to use that term? So definitely communicate with us through the meeting chat room. If for some reason the internet falls out and we lose all communication, we are recording and presumably that'll keep going. However, I will, as a little stopgap, what I will do is open up the work and you'll be able to, I've made it fairly user friendly, so you'll be able to go through the work and follow the activities and things tonight and do them all by yourself if the internet does crash. There is a chance, because we have lots and lots of people are on now, and you can see tonight's lesson and the work we're going to do is shown here. There's a few quizzes and activities at the bottom, but everything's fairly self-explanatory, so that if we do lose connection, you can, when you do get connection over the next little while, you can hop on and do the work and follow the activities and things like that. Don't forget to keep up to date with the latest coronavirus information and announcements from TAFE New South Wales. And so I'll just quickly take you to this last one, which was updated on the 25th of March, which was yesterday at 5:37. And it basically says there that teaching will pause, and it will give you a bit of a scare if you haven't followed my messages, because it does say that pretty much all teaching stops until the 27th of April. However, we are clear in this course to continue because we don't need to attend campuses. Now, I have some campuses may close down and have non-attendance tonight, and that's okay. That's due to other circumstances and things happening, and we need to keep distances and things, so we're mindful of all of that. And we're just going to try and make sure that we can get through our work and everything, and I'm confident that we can. And the end of next week, this time next week after our lesson, we should be finished everything that we need for this unit, and then you have a week off. And then we'll be clear to start again after Easter, once it gets going again, as far as we know. But do keep an eye on your emails. Now, because you're going to be builders in the 21st century, 10 or 11 years into it, actually, you are already, you'll need to make sure that you can keep communication available to you. So I asked someone there recently in a class, are you getting messages that we send through? And out of 120 or so of yous, this one said, well, no, I'm not sure actually. So the thing is, at the moment, it's probably not quite so critical because you're not running a business. But when you're running a business, you need to check your emails a couple of times a day probably, and have a system that will allow you to do that. Generally, you'll want to use email as your main communication. So I just see Doug's put a note up there, test week C9 video is private. Douglas, are you referring to something that's on here? I don't think there's no videos for tonight. Just hoping you're able to get onto and view the lesson there. Let me know in the chat box if you need help. Maybe someone will jump on and help there. So when you run your own business, you need to have a means of communication where you can quickly communicate with people and get information that's sent through. And that way you can keep up to date with things, and because you're running a business and a livelihood. Once you get out of here, and you'll be so flat out with the with the bushfire work and people getting the economy getting going again, that you'll be real busy. So before we start tonight, I do want to just highlight a couple of things for you. And I have it all set up here for you through the HIA, and many of you have probably already received this information. And I just want to highlight to you that here's one organisation that that will can keep you up to date with information. This is called Housing Industry Association for a reason, because it's dealing with housing, and the Master Builders Association has similar things, and there's other places where you can get information. And this was something that I came across that I thought might be particularly useful for you. And it's, if you've got the ability to go to work and to still operate on a construction site, then this might be quite useful to you, because they've got information in here about how you can keep on operating, even though I'll try and find it here, even though you may have some interruptions and things. If you can still operate and you're allowed to, then here's an example of an update, I guess it is, from the HIA that they've been putting out to people, so you can make sure that you can still operate on a construction site. So I'm going to let you all have a look at those sorts of things yourself. This is an update that came out a couple of days ago, and that sort of information comes out to you on your emails if you just subscribe to some of these things, so you can keep up to date with what's happening, because it is your career, and you will need to try and keep up to update so that things work there. So thank you, Doug. You've said there's a link under there and it just goes to private. It may be something that I'll just check what's happening there. So because we're pretty much going to be doing all online now for the next little while, we'll just have to be a little bit more patient as we work things through. So if you're on C9, I think the attendance choice is working. There should be plenty of people there who are accessing that. Yeah, grab the microphone there, Douglas, if you had.
Just ignore it, everyone. Please ignore it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just keep going, guys. Ignore it. Don't worry about it. I've gotten rid of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So that's all good. So what we want to talk about tonight is we're going to get you ready for your last assessment for this unit. And so pretty much what we're going to do is tonight we're going to be talking about fire safety. Okay, and we're going to get you ready for your last assessment. So to do that, I'm going to open up a couple of things here. You just refresh your pages, and I'll highlight some things here that we're going to talk about. So your last assessment, which will be opened after tonight, is called Codes and Standards Assessment 3, and it's going to be in a submission box, which will be, once you've done this, you'll be able to submit it and put it through. And the purpose of this is for you to be able to apply fire protection requirements from the code, so that you're able to work out a little bit about what level of fire resistance is needed. And you're going to actually check existing buildings. I'll do one for you tonight as an example, and then you'll run off and do some checks yourselves and take some photos and show us whether the buildings you check comply with the National Construction Code or whether they don't. And we'll do a volume 1 type building, which is a class 2 to 9, and we'll do a volume 2 type of building, which is a class 1 or 10. And you'll check those buildings, show us some pictures of what they have for fire resistance, and then tell us whether they comply or not, and show us in the code where they do comply or they should comply. So you will carry out a site visit. Now, organised by yourselves. Now, that's something, when you do site visits, you either have to make sure that you've got permission, or you may be able to do a virtual site visit, which I'll do one tonight, or you may have some photos of things that you've done in the past. We have to be very conscious of the directives about having too many people and going to areas where you shouldn't go. So you have to be mindful of that. But basically what you will do is present your findings from wherever you get them of a physical audit or an audit against the fire protection requirements of the NCC, and at least 2 buildings, including one, so a class 1 and a class, obviously one from volume 1 and one from volume 2. Okay, so you're required to include these things, and we've got this all set out neatly for you, so you can just follow the document that we've got ready for you. Basically what you're going to do is discuss the job that you're investigating, where it is, what class and type of fire rating it is. Okay, and you'll understand more about that tonight. You'll also discuss the fire controls that have or will be constructed for a building that's being constructed, and then looking at fire separation walls, sprinkler system, fire doors, anything like that that you can find on the code that the particular building might relate to. And then you'll have a look and compare and report on passive and active fire control elements. Okay, ensure the correct level of fire resistance is determined and check back on compliance. Make sure you've noted all of that. Discuss the difference between fire elements. Ensure the building complies with the reference. So you can do a video presentation, it's highly recommended, or you can do photos. So that's an example of the last assignment that'll be done. Pretty much a site visit, a few questions and answers and things, and that'll be pretty straightforward. So that document there is available for you to have a little look at and get some assistance. And then there's another one here that I'm going to open up for you. If you just refresh, you'll be able to see that okay. And this particular one is about the fire requirements. Already had that open actually. So this is just a little bit more about what you'll be doing. You'll be looking at a class 1 building. You'll be explaining the building a bit, why it's a class 1 building, showing us some photos. Look for fire control measures, if any. For example, smoke alarms, blankets, sprinklers, things like that. If it's not required, write about it and refer back in the code. Look up fire safety in the acceptable construction in the NCC and explain how this building meets or doesn't meet. If you find any other items, refer to Australian standard, okay? And that's what you do for that. So that's for a class 1 building. And then the second part there is a commercial building, class 7 car park, for example, or a shop or an office or something like that, whatever it might be. Obviously, once again, be careful about how you enter or take information about those buildings and what you do, and just remember the current environment and all those sorts of things. So you're pretty much doing the same type of thing. In this case, there could be much more advanced fire resistance measures in the building, like sprinklers and that type of thing. But you still go into the code, obviously volume 1, and you look at that and you're looking to see what it has in the way of fire control measures, okay? And then you're looking up fire safety in the NCC and explaining how it's compliant or not compliant and showing us why it's compliant or not compliant. All right, so that's an example of your assignment and what you'll be doing with that. Just check and see if there's any questions coming through there. Douglas, are you all good? Brett, can you just check that? Or Glenn or Stuart there, just think you're pretty right there, Douglas, but
yeah, guys, if you can't get in, just try later. It's just a bit slow on Microsoft Forms today.
Okay.
So just keep going, guys. Thanks, mate.
That's all good. Okay, so just refresh my screen here, make sure I've got all the latest information on it, which I think I have there. That's all good. So what we want to look at tonight is, I'll just show you this one, is what is the objective of fire safety? And so here's a little grab here from part 2.3, and the objective of fire safety. And so in volume 2, part 2.3, it outlines there, not sure quite how big I can make that, but let's have a try and see. So you can see on your screen, pretty much what it explains there is that the objective is to safeguard the occupants from injury or illness by alerting them of a fire in the building so that they may safely evacuate. That's the first thing. We want to be able to get human life out of the building, and we don't want them to be injured or ill from the fire heating appliances that are installed in the building, or in alpine areas from an emergency while evacuating the building. So they're the first things. This is to do with occupants, okay? The second thing there is we want to avoid the spread of fire. If possible, try and slow the fire down or contain it. The third thing is we want to protect the building from the effects of the fire. That's well down the list after human life. And then the next thing there is reduce the likelihood of fatalities arising from occupants in Class 1A dwelling, not evacuating a property prior to exposure from a bushfire event. So that's a new one that's been applied and will be new things and that comes out of all the bushfires that have happened recently. So they're our objectives, and they're the sort of things that are being looked at to be able to make sure that buildings comply and that buildings are safe to look through. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you where those are so that we can, I'm just going to jump back here, and I've actually got my codes already lined up. If you haven't got your codes lined up, Remember, you go to the top up here and you can access your National Construction Code there. By now, you should have them stored on your computer, really, because we're going to use those quite a lot. And the codes don't disappear on your computer like the Australian standards do. So grab yourself the codes, and then there's the first activity for you to do tonight, which is a quick fire safety provisions activity. And I'm going to go through, ask you to pop a discussion in here, and I want you to view volume 2 and everybody list one performance provision at least for fire safety, just real quickly. So go to volume 2 and list a performance provision for fire safety. Now let's spend a couple of minutes having a look at that. Once again, what you need to do in volume 2 is expand the book, use the bookmarks, which is here on the side. And we're dealing with fire safety. So we can come in here and you'll find performance requirements is listed there. I should change that so that it uses the word requirements. The old code had the word provisions, and now it's got the word performance requirements, sorry. So the point there is to list the performance requirements. So give you a couple of minutes to go through and have a look at that. What are some of the performance requirements for fire safety? And let's see what people are popping in there. Cody's might be first there. Class A building must be protected from spread of fire, the allotment boundary. That's quite good. We're dealing there with specific deemed to satisfy provisions there, and it'll actually list information about measurements and things, which we'll look at a little bit later. Thanks, Douglas. So we've got there an allotment boundary. Now I'm thinking you've gone P231. Let's have a look. Thank you for putting P231 in there. P231 spread of fire. So that's 1 is the spread of fire, and you've covered that. If you look back at where we were up the top here, here we go, fire safety. Performance provisions. So your main, for fire safety, we've got spread of fire and automatic warning for occupants. They'd be our 2 main performance requirements that we have there. Okay, so those are correct what you're putting in there, but that's pretty much under one of those actions. We've got a few others that have gone in there. That's good. Very good. So there's the second one there. Fire safety, Connor, thanks for that. 2-3 is capable of withstanding the heat flux. So we've gone into some of the specific details here. You've got V. When you see a V in front of it, that's going to be, if I just show you where that is, that's the verification methods. Okay, so it's broken down like this. We have performance requirements, which is the broad statement about what needs to be done. In this case, what the statement is about the spread of fire and also about the warning, automatic warning for occupants. And then when you go into these ones, it'll come down. So this particular one here is the performance requirements, and the next heading in a box is verification methods, and the next one down there is the deemed to satisfy, which comes up somewhere here. It might be right down the bottom, actually, under the next section. So where we've got one on there. So that's great. You've all participated in that pretty good. Got some activities going in there. I'm just going to shut that one down. We won't look at too many of those. So now I've got another quick discussion, and this particular one now is about a specific term that we need to be aware of, and it's called fire resistance level. Okay, so this particular one says define fire resistant level from volume 2, and then confirm that it means the same thing in volume 1. So it's FRL, fire resistance level. Because you're in the fire area here, you'll find that comes up somewhere, and you can usually just hyperlink straight back to the definitions. I'm just going to let you all have a go at that before I help you too much, and let's see how you go with that one. So just give us a quick definition of what fire resistant level is, and then put a yes or a no or something as to whether it means the same thing in volume 1, whether it's even mentioned in volume 1, whether we need it in volume 1. And that's taking a little while to find information there. Yes, shouldn't be too bad. Remember, you do have definitions here. Schedule 3, which is definitions. I don't want to make it too easy for you. Just let's see if you can find that yourselves. You'll find this is a definition that's spoken about often when it comes to fire. So fire resistant level, FRL. Who's going to be first on this one? Hoping everybody's still there. Seems like they might have gone. How are we going, Stuart? Oh, yes, there's one. Well, we've got a couple came in there. Okay, so let's have a quick look at Ryan here, see what Ryan's got down. Awesome, Ryan. Yes, it's the same for volume 1. Structural adequacy, integrity and insulation. That's very good. Okay, took a little bit of searching for that when you look around, but this is something you really need to be aware of when you're dealing with fire. So it's the structural adequacy, integrity and insulation expressed in that order. And yes, thank you. Didn't mention there, but it is the same in volume 1. So what's Nicholas got in here? Let's have a quick look at this one. It's grading in minutes, so that's a good bit of detail there. So that's good. That's determined in minutes, down to the minute. I'm going to show you tonight how they do that. I think you might be interested in that. I'm not going to go through too many more of that because we do have a little bit to go through on things tonight. I want to just go through it fairly quickly, just overview, because we're in a little bit of an unusual situation. We're doing it all online, so I'm conscious that that could be a little bit confusing for you. So a little bit of a discussion here that I've put up that I want to talk about some definitions dealing with fire safety. Now, I'm going to be skipping back and forwards just a little bit here because I want to flick screens just to talk about a couple of these things. The first thing I want to talk about is non-combustible and combustible materials. These are terms, so I'm going to copy that. Just can right click and copy that. And I want to look at these terms as they're expressed in the code. I'm going to go straight to volume 2 first. You can see that I've got a heap open there, but this particular one's volume 2. I'm going to bring up my little search box and put that in there, and I don't actually need all of them. I just want one of those terms, and let's just have a look and see what they talk about. So here's a hot link here to one called combustible materials, and let's see first of all what the term combustible means. Now, this is very interesting because it's taken us straight to an Australian standard, which I've got open up here for you to dazzle you with. You can see it says here, combustible means applied to a material, combustible, as determined in Australian Standard 1530.1 and applied to construction or part of a building, constructed wholly or part of combustible material. So there's a definition for that one there. And then if we look at non-combustible, I'll just go down to N. For non, I'm not actually sure if there's a definition for non-combustible because that's obviously the opposite of combustible. That's only F there. Duck back, just close your eyes for a second if you're getting dizzy. We don't have a, yes, we do have a non-combustible. So the definition here, and I'm in the definitions section. The definitions here for non-combustible mean when applied to material not deemed combustible as determined by 1530.1. Combustibility test for materials, and when applied to construction or part of a building, constructed wholly of materials that are not deemed combustible. So this Australian standard hit comes up again, and that's something that I want to look at in a little while. It's something that we really need to go through and have a look at. Just I think I'll just check. I think I've got that listed here throughout the night where I spend a bit of time looking at that one. Here, I don't want to miss that one. So there's our different terms that we've got there. I'll just grab this little definition here. Fire resistant level. That's something that we need to be aware of. So in this particular case, we can just search for that through FRL. And if we go back here down here to F, if I go to definitions somewhere there, and we just scroll down to F, the fire resistant level comes up and it gives you a definition which you've all found. And in fact, I'm just going to go straight to structural adequacy. I'll come by here. Here we go. Fire resistance. I'll drop by fire resistance level. You can see that's where that's coming from. So fire resistant level means in minutes from Schedule 5, in accordance with Schedule 5 for following criteria. So structural adequacy, integrity, and insulation. I'm on page 505, so I'll just make a note because I want to come back to this in a second. Just want to show you what structural adequacy means. Structural adequacy in relation to a fire resistant level means the ability to maintain stability and adequate load bearing capacity as determined by Australian SIC 1530.4. Let me just show you how they find that. This is Australian Standard 1530.4 that I downloaded earlier. And tomorrow this will be all green because they don't last for more than about 24 hours. And so when you look at ones like this, this is actually, it's quite interesting. This is how the regulate the measurement people go through and they set up standards and they measure heaps and heaps of things. I'll just shrink all these so you can see the main headings and get an idea of what's in here. As we look through here, we see basically we've got the scope and the general requirements. And in this particular case, we've got walls that are separating elements. In parts of this deals with lots and lots of different parts of a building. For example, here's beams and beams, girders and trusses. And this one here sets out the procedures for determining the fire resistance of beams, girders and trusses. And it's quite technical. If you look at this, it's got the size. So we're dealing here with a length of not less than 3 metres. We've got to make sure that we work to certain sizes. Beams that are incorporating concrete floral systems, they'll have to work on things like that. We'll have instrumentation like thermal couples, which are listed what they are exactly. We'll start to deal with things like our test specimens, and then I want to dazzle you for a second on some of the calculations that they go into. There might not be any there actually. I had some earlier with service penetrations and joints where we put electrical wires and things through joints, and we look at some of the ways that they test these, and it's just above our head. So we really want to remember that when we start coming to these areas, it's real important that we follow exactly what the our engineers' details and things specify. Otherwise, we're going to get we're going to end up building buildings that aren't necessarily built to standard. Okay, so here's an example here of a test position of free. There was a. I'll just see if I can find it. Here we go, monitoring for integrity. This is an example of how the test procedure. So this test procedure shall be subjected to fire resistance. This is a test procedure here, and this is how they monitor for integrity. That's one of the things that we're going to look at in a second. A cotton pad shall be applied to any gaps or fissures on the unexposed face of the test assembly, as described in there, and the sill of the assembly shall be monitored by means of a 25mm diameter gap gauge. So these is very, very specific. And this cotton pad it's set up so that it looks like this. Hopefully I can find the little picture real quick. That might have been it there actually. No, I might have to come back to that one. So here might be a cotton pad here. There we go. So they'll set up a little test facility that looks like this. Here's a cotton pad frame. Here's a test facility. Number 2 is a clip that's open. Here we've got the cotton pad, and this will be a certain distance from the element that they're testing. And then what they'll do is they'll, for integrity, they'll make sure that they that cotton pad obviously doesn't ignite, I imagine, and things like that. So that's some of the things that they do to check for things like integrity. Okay, so here's integrity. In relation to FRL, means the ability to resist the passage of flames and hot gases as specified in 1530.4. That's the one I was showing you. And I'm just sorry I didn't find some real dazzling calculations just straight away, but there's heaps of them there and they're really complicated how they work all that out. Then we have a third thing there for the FRL, and that's the insulation. And this means the ability to maintain a temperature on the surface not exposed to the furnace. The furnace is the flame, the main flame, below the limits specified in 1530.4. So that's all specified in that standard about how that's got to work. And so that's an example of what FRL stands for. Okay. And then we've got things like allowable encroachment. Now, somebody put this into the into one of the discussions a second ago, and I'll see if I can find that real quickly. I'm just using that control find and the search button through there. We're talking here about fire safety. We're talking about fire separation of external walls. So this is going to give us the allowable encroachment, some allowable encroachment information. We're in section 3. So remember, in section 3, we're in acceptable construction. We're past the broad performance provisions as to what the building has to be able to do. We're now down to exact millimetres and exact numbers of Australian standards about what is acceptable and what's not, because we're in section 3, acceptable construction. You can see 3727. I can easily pop that out for you. So 372. This is on 372. Drop that one out there. 3727. So 372 would be the fire separation of external walls. And this is going to tell us about the allowable encroachments. So an encroachment is any construction. So let me just check the, oh, sorry, Amy, that was a bit smaller. Is that okay now? I'll just move this over a bit so I can make that a little bit bigger for you. Hopefully that's coming through okay. Amy and Bradley, my computer updated its Windows, so now my NCC volumes 1 and 2 don't have the bookmarks tab. So what you need to make sure with that one, Bradley, is that you have, this comes up commonly actually. What you need to make sure is that you've got Adobe Connect installed. So just click on the little Windows button down the bottom left and just start typing Adobe, and make sure you've got Adobe Reader in there. You won't have Adobe Acrobat probably, because that's an expensive one that TAFE buys, but you should see Reader, and then you should have a bookmarks tab. If you don't have it up there, you go up here to View and you work your way down here, and there's one there that says bookmarks tab. I can never remember which one it is, but there's one there that says bookmarks tab, and not quite sure which one it is, but there's one there that has a bookmarks tab that shows. Every time I do this, I forget where it is. So you can just look on these and it'll come up so that you can actually see the bookmarks tab. Somebody can maybe have a look and help Bradley out there. Somewhere in there you can turn the bookmarks tab off and on the view option up the top. And if you don't have the view option, it's because your Adobe documents aren't opening in the format of Adobe. And I go over this every now and then, but basically what you need to do is make sure that wherever you've stored that file, you right click on it, go down to properties, and always make sure they open to Adobe Acrobat. Every now and then, even for me, every couple of weeks, they default back to Microsoft Edge. That's the default because Microsoft owns most of the computers software, and they send out little updates and bang, they set everything back to Microsoft Edge. So you just got to go in and change it to your Adobe Acrobat Reader, go okay, apply it, and then it'll make sure it opens with that particular system. And that way you'll have most of the navigations and you'll be able to find things quite easily. Hopefully that works. Bradley, just tell us if you're stuck and I'll check back every now and then. So here we're dealing with encroachment, and somebody put it up earlier that, for example, encroachments allowed within 900 mil of an allotment boundary or within 1.8 of another building on the same allotment are non-combustible fascias, gutters and downpipes, light fittings, electricity and gas meters, aerials and antennas, pergolas, sun blinds and water tanks, if they're non-combustible, okay, and things like that, and ramps not more than a metre in height. So there's some quite specific information there, and that's dealing with allowable encroachments, which we've got to be aware of. That's what that means, dealing with fire. We have a thing there called fire separating walls. So if we just have a bit of a look here at separating walls, P-A-R-A-T, it's spelt wrong on the little system there, so that's all good. You can see separating has an A in it. Sorry, I didn't fix that one. So that's got an E in it. You won't be able to find anything. And talks here about fire separating walls. If I just go to the top of the book and start searching my way through, we have here on part 3.7, fire safety. we're dealing there with part 3. So I'm back down here to fire safety. We have fire protection of separating walls in construction, and we have our acceptable construction practice. We're in volume 2 here, so it's a little bit easier to navigate, I think. And that's an example of what separating walls are. A separating wall is something that's defined as means a wall that is common to adjoining Class 1 buildings. Okay, here's an example of a separating wall. Because they're too close to have access, to have fireproof, to keep the fire out, and so you have to build them out of certain types of materials. Then we have designated bushfire prone areas, and in that particular case, that's changing as time goes on. Who would have thought Bateman's Bay might have had the fires that you all had down there? And this is probably comes from the previous code. I didn't actually adjust that. Designated bushfire. I'll just see if it picks up those few words there. Here we go. I had it spelt wrong, obviously, but if we go to this one, normally that would grab all of that wording and we'd be all good there. But let's pop that up here and see if we can get a few different references to it. There it is. And it's not actually taking me to the definition, so we'll just keep working our way through here. And you can see that here it says, if they're constructed in a designated bushfire prone area, must be designed in a certain way. Okay, I'm going to just come down here to definitions, which comes out, we're on volume 2. So we should have a definitions, there it is. If I search for it here, we should come up with it. And there we go. So this is on the definitions, and it's a designated bushfire prone area means land which has been designated under a power of legislation as being subject or likely to be subject to bushfires. Now, can anybody quickly type into the chat box where we might find that information from? And Nicholas, it might be bandwidth or things like that, but the recording will have it on it. Maybe I'll just tell you where I am each time as I change screens, because the sound will probably keep coming through. If you're having a lot of trouble with this, just turn off your video so that all you hear is the sound. So can anybody type in the chat box where they think we could find out if a particular address is designated bushfire prone area or not? It gets classed by the RFS, yes, and the RFS may show where that is. I'm not quite sure, but I know definitely if you go to one place, if you go to one site, it will tell you where the designated bushfire areas are. Can anybody type in the chat box where that is or where that might be? I took you there a month or two ago when we were doing work health safety. Your bandwidth might be too slow to type in there, so I might just give you a bit of a tip on that, and I'll jump back here and quickly show you. So if I just go to my local government area, which in our case is Wagga, and I just always search for one online maps, but in your area, you can do the same type of thing. You might have something a bit different. It's going to be your local government area that's going to specify that. Oh, it's possible that things have changed here a tiny little bit. Let's have a look and see if I got the right one. Things are changing a bit at the moment, so we'll just, here we go. We've got to make sure that's all there. We've got on interactive maps is here. And this will tell us information. So in this particular case, I can go to Intramaps. Most local government authorities or councils in Australia, or a lot of them, tap into this. And you can pretty much just tap into the bushfire map there, and that'll show us all the bushfire areas. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that's coming through for you, and that's your council, and that'll tell you. And when you go into when you build in a designated bushfire area, then you're going to have to build your building a little bit differently. Okay, and so that's something that you've got to be aware of. Can anybody type into the chat box one thing that you might have to build differently in a designated bushfire area? And you'll find it listed there on volume 2 and in the Australian standards, and another document that I'll show you tonight. But has anybody ever had to put different types of fly screens, not the fiberglass fly screens, but metal fly screens on their windows in a bushfire area? So I'm just going to type in giving you a chance to type that in, which might not work. The next one here, which I'll just go straight up to B in the definitions and find. And so the last definition we want to be aware of is BAL, and that's the bushfire attack level. And this will be changing quite a bit. I'm not actually sure if they give us a full definition of that there. I'll just try typing for it in here. Bushfire attack. Yep. Bushfire attack level. They may not have a definition for that, but in a building, they have a thing called a bushfire attack level. Here we go. Section 9 has a bushfire attack level. So Australian Standard, if you're located in a bushfire area, Australian Standard 3959. So here, this is a state and territory variation. I'll just keep on going down past that to try and get to that, and that's not going to mention that in there. It might have that in volume 1, but that's a bushfire attack level. And thanks, Amy. There's quite a few different things that are used in the standards there. I'll just grab that wording from here, so we can do a quick check back on this over here in volume 1. So I've gone to volume 1 now to see if they had anything different on that. And they mentioned that pretty much the same type of thing in this New South Wales. They mention Australian Standard 3959, and they talk about this bushfire attack level, BALFCZ. Okay, specific requirements. I've actually got 3. Which Australian Standard was that? I think it was 3959. I think I've got that up there at the moment. I had that earlier that I was looking at today. So I'm just going to do a quick search for that here. And you can see here it gives us information here about bushfire attack levels. This is, if I shrink that up so you can see where we are, just bring all of these back in so we can see the overall contents of the book. In this particular case, we've got section 1, scope and general, and we have here bushfire attack levels, and there's usually definitions at the beginning here, which is on point 8. They don't actually define it there, but if we go to page 11 up here, should be able to duck straight through to page 11, somewhere around there. It should have, sometimes the numbers up there don't line up with the numbers on the actual page. If we go to here, we have a listing here of the bushfire attack level. So we've got bushfire attack levels. The following standards are based on heat flux, exposure thresholds, and there's more information on that. There's a little bit technical, this one, and it's quite a bit scientific, but we've got our different levels there that work through depending on where you are. You go to low and then right through to your different levels and things. Okay, see Appendix G for a description of the threats associated with each bushfire attack level. Appendixes are always at the back, and I've found that one there for you. Explanation of bushfire attack levels. And so we've got heaps and heaps of information here on that gives us an example of how all that works. And here's an example of explanation of bushfire attack levels. Okay, so it goes through the different information there. We come once again to that definition, kilowatts per square metre. And remember, 1 kilowatt is equivalent to one little bar heater. Okay, I'll shut that down. So we've got a little bar heater, little electric bar heater. There you go. There's a little electric bar heater, one of these types. That's 2.4 kilowatt. Okay, if we had a 1 kilowatt, then that's an example of a little bar heater that exerts that amount of heat on 1 square metre. This particular one, pain to humans, is when you get to 4, they're saying there. An ignition of timber is 55 of those bar heaters, if you could get all 55 of them all onto one square metre. So it's really scientific, and the thing that I'm trying to get through here is that this is really scientific, and if it says put metal screens on the window, it says it for all those scientific reasons. Okay, so just a little quick thing here for you. I'm going to open up this PowerPoint and just skim through this quickly so we can get to our activities. And that's an example of how that works. So in this particular PowerPoint, I'm just going to show you a couple of slides from here that I want you to be aware of. And I'm hoping you can look, I can see it on my phone quite clearly, so I'm assuming you can all see it on your screen. And pretty much we talked about safeguarding people and buildings. So people are first, and then the structure, and then try and get the fire out, and then the structure and things like that. We talk about these ones. I'm just making sure I've covered everything here. I do want to talk about this one, which is the type of construction required. So I'm going to go in volume 1 of the standards here to table C.11, because this so C.11, I think it is. Yep. Table C1. Let's see if we can get straight to it quite quickly. There's no hyperlink to that there, so I'll just grab that exact spelling because it might be a bit different to what I had. And let's just go quickly to that table. Here it is. So this is pretty important to us because remember, we're in volume 1, which is class 2 to 9 buildings. And this is really important that we understand that this defines for us the type of construction. So the type of fire resisting construction there that we have to build our building to. So if you go and do work on some of these buildings and then they require certain things, this is the reason why. So they say there basically that a C-type construction is a lot less, what can we say? They're all important, but you would have a lot less fire facilities in that one, and a lot less cost for fire than what you would in an A class of construction. Because it just makes sense, really. If you've got rise of stories of 4 or more, you need to have more systems in place to stop fire and to put it out before it injures anybody and allow people to get out and all those sorts of things. So that's how it kind of works. And here we have class 2, 3, 9. That's kind of how that works. And then 5, 6, 7, 8. And if you look at those classes of buildings, that's kind of how that works. And you can see what happens here with a 2, 3 and a 9. There's more people in those buildings, presumably, and that might be asleep and might need a bit more help to get out because it goes to level A quite a bit quicker for the level of stories. You can see 1 story, they're both a C. 2 story, we've gone straight to a B for a 2, 3 or 9 building, but we're still at a C for this class of building. So if you check those classes of buildings, it's probably like where the teachers are sitting right now and you were last week. Everybody's awake, ambulant, potentially, or if they're not ambulant, they can get in and out of a building because we've got the access for people with a disability provisions that have been included. And so people aren't necessarily sleeping. They're not necessarily in a building they're not familiar with. Imagine being in a hotel or somewhere where you're a boarding house and you never got there before until you rolled in at 10 o'clock at night and it's dark and late, bit disoriented, hop into bed, and then the fire alarm goes off. Who's ever had that happen? And so that you don't really know what to do. So it's real important when you get to those places to follow the instructions that are given, and hopefully someone will tell you what to do when you get there. So then we go straight to an A level quite quickly with that because because of the where people are at as far as the ability to be able to get out and understand what the building's like and things like that. And that's what that talks about there. So I'm just skimming through this. You can just refer back to it yourselves pretty quickly. Just to give you an overview, we've been through that one, making sure I don't miss things. Here's where I want to spend a tiny little bit of time here. So I want to look at clause 1962 in Australian Standard 1530.4. Now this is on the PowerPoint on slide 10. So I suggest when we're doing these online lessons, just have a pad of paper next to you and a pen. And you can write down these sorts of things or anything that's of interest to you. For example, I'd jot down volume 1, page 65, because that's got the type of construction. You're going to use that quite a bit. That whole section there, you're going to use quite a bit over the next little while. And so it'll just make it easier for you because even though you're at home, you can still follow us quite okay with what we're doing. So that you understand the importance of following all plans and engineers' details during your construction career. I wrote this today, pretty important, isn't it? have a look at the process for testing materials in 1530.4. Expand the bookmarks and have a look at them. I'm going to do this for you, so because you're online there. And what we're going to do is look at a few of the bookmarks on how tests are done. It's complicated and detailed, and you thought you could just knock up a building the way you used to, or just however you thought best. So let's have a look at 1962, and then I'm going to have a look at clause 10.1. I'm going to go to so I'm going to go to 1962, clause 1962. We'll shrink that down a little bit. I've got to go to 1530, Australian Standard 1530.4. I'm going to go down here to 1962. I think that was the one I was looking at. Just let me try and find it here. So I'm an Australian Standard 1530.4 and I'm going 1962. I'll just do a quick search for it here. Not there. I'm sure that was the one I was dealing with. Let's just check the cover of this building. Part 4, 1530. I might just forget about that and go straight to 10.1 because that might have been a reference to an older one. Let's just go to 10.1. We'll make that big here. Okay, here we go. This is what I want to talk about with you. So in this particular case, we're talking here about service penetrations and control joints. I'm on page 102 of Australian Standard 1530.4. It says here in general, which is always an explanation of what's going to happen for this section. It says this section sets out the procedure for determining the fire resistance of elements of construction. So the element of construction is like the wall. When it's penetrated by services such as electrical, plumbing, pipes, conduits, control joints, and air transfer grills not fitted to ducts. It should be read in conjunction with section 2. So section 2 is up here, and that talked about general requirements. And so in this particular case, this is technical document that's going to go into information for testing, remember, of structures and things. But I just want to show you an example of how they test it so that when you see that they require certain things, you'll understand why. So in this particular case, they're going to test, the test they're going to do is service joints through a fire resisting construction wall, penetrating a couple of buildings, and they're going to look at, I like the pictures best, so let's go and have a look at some of the pictures and some of the information. First, they talk about the different table groupings and what they will be. And then down here, we come to the positioning of the measuring instruments, which is the thermal couplers. Okay, thermal couplers is how they measure the things and where they're going to put it. And so, for example, in this case, we've got our penetrating service, we've got our wall, main fire stopping system. In this particular case, this is the furnace side for their test. And here we've got the local fire stopping system. Here we've got the penetrating service, which could be a pipe or whatever it might be. There's some insulation around it. And we've got the main fire stopping system. So it's quite technical. You can see how they've specified all of this. This is all written and determined by specific measurements. Okay, and where they place it all, it's all got to be done a certain way so that they can make sure that they test it. This is an example of what they do with the furnace. So the pressure conditions, the test procedure. Furnace pressure shall be controlled in accordance with the following. Pressure of 15 plus or minus 3 pascals shall be established, example, and et cetera, and they go through all of that. As far as integrity, where difficulties arise in attempting to use the cotton pad, which I showed you earlier, just placed on a little stand, a certain size stand, certain size cotton pad, certain height off where it's going to be tested, then they make sure that it's you've got certain things you've got to follow there, and they test it all. So trying to get through to some of the complicated calculations so that you get scared and don't try and build things by yourselves. Maybe someone can find some of those and pop them in the chat box. So this is done quite a bit. There's an example of how they're testing things. And then I want to try and show you a calculate. Doesn't have calculate in there. I'll leave that bit for now. But so pretty much that's an example of where of the main thing that we need to know there is that we don't just build things, knock up a building the way we used to, or we don't just do it however we think best. We need to make sure that we follow the engineer's details and the standards because they've been tested, and everything's been set up in such a way to be able to resist all the elements that come against it. So we've covered these pretty good here, and I do want to just show you a couple of things that are at the end of that PowerPoint, and probably the only way you're going to access that is to just copy all of that information there, and then so copy that and then paste it into a web page, and then you'll be able to all go with it. And that'll show you an example of, I think it's the same as what I've got up the top here. So this is going to talk here about smoke alarms. And in this particular case, we're on fire.newsouthwales.gov.au. All good. And we've got smoke alarms here, and it tells us, this is going to tell us the latest information about what the requirements are for smoke alarms in houses. And it talks about things like that. This has been in for quite a while, and that's really interesting. The risk of a fatality in a home fire is halved if there is a working smoke alarm in a building. And these have been put in for years. It's over 10 years since they brought them in, and most smoke alarms don't last. So I just go through and check every now and then and just make sure that my smoke alarms are all set up properly and that they're all okay, and that they are in date, and just keep a record of that type of information. Okay, so let's just jump back here and have a look at another one. That's from Fire New South Wales. This particular one is going to tell us about fire construction. Whoop. Sorry, hope you don't get too dizzy here. Let's just go and have a look at this one here on fire construction. This one's from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, and they have a lot of information here about how you can plan your building, particularly for rural, because it's got the name rural in the heading there. So the other one was more in towns, and there's heaps and heaps of information that they have in here for buildings. And in some cases, these have to be followed. There you go, guidelines for single dwelling development applications. Okay, user guide for complying development, building best practice guide. As a builder, you want to be aware of that sort of thing. So they'll say in there things like using, like metal, like aluminium fly screens or metal fly screens, having no gaps around the building and those sorts of things around openings. And you just need to be real aware of that. So I think this one here, I just want to go through and give you a little bit of an idea about active and passive fire controls. Now, I want to start with this disclaimer. There used to be a lot of information in the old codes about active and passive, but in the new codes that they are not defined and not even mentioned very much at all. It doesn't really even tell us what an active and a passive is, but there are companies that develop this type of thing, and here's one of them. And I want to just outline just a little bit to you about how this works, and then we're going to talk about the difference between active and passive. It's pretty much what you're thinking in your head right now. If you have a fire system that needs someone to actively operate it, then it's active. If it can passively put the fire out or maintain the fire or keep people safe or do any of those things that are mentioned in the fire resistant level, then it's probably a passive one. And you would need more passive type systems, something that operates more if people aren't very ambulant and they can't get around much themselves. So this particular one is a leader in passive fire systems. And in this case, these guys have a paint that you can put on, fireproofing or fireproof paint that you can put onto building elements to be able to stop the fire. And I want to tell you a quick little story about that. I was working on supervising a set of units up near Newcastle years and years ago, and I came onto the job after when they were coming up towards the end, and the brickies had just bricked up between two garages on a unit that had a fire separating wall, and that was supposed to be double brickwork between the garages. And when they got to once they got to above the ceiling in the garage, they just popped it all back to one brickwork, single skin of brickwork, and up they went. And they'd done that on about, I think they got away with about 2 or 3 lots of units. And the inspector came along, somehow or other found that, because there wasn't a lot of supervision before that. And then my first job there was to get some of this type of paint, fire resisting paint, and to get up in the ceiling and paint both sides of that single skin brick wall, because the rating for that fire separating wall was not for single skin, it was meant to be brick cavity wall. And so that's the sort of thing. Of course, we had to try that paint out on a bit of fibro in the fire that you used to be able to have on site back then. And the effect of it in the fire was that it would just bubble up and keep the fibro cement quite cool on one side, while the side that was painted exposed to the weather, to the fire, was heated up and expanded and provided good insulation. So that's an example of some fire controls and systems and things like that. Now I'm going to open this up for you just for your interest, and you can have a look on the ABCB website and look at other documents that are produced that deal with fire. And I'll open that activity up for you too, and you can do that yourself sometime. But I want to skip down now to fire detector, to smoke detectors, and have a quick look getting you ready for an exercise that we're going to do tonight. So in this particular case, we want to look at smoke alarms 3752. This is, so I think that's in volume 2. So volume 2, I've got volume 2 up there, 3752. Just come back up to the top here, make sure I'm in volume 2. Yes. And I'm going to go to part 3752. Easiest way is probably just to grab those numbers out of there and put them into the search box up the top here, and that'll take me straight to it. And you can see I'm in part 3752, which is down here for fire safety. If I go to smoke alarm requirements, which I think you can see, thanks Amy, it is very expensive. It cost a fortune, but it was cheaper than pulling the roof down and re-bricking up and pulling that brick wall down. So I do remember that was very expensive back then. And lots of students can deal with that from time to time. Maybe that's a cheaper solution than bricking up the wall. So our little point here is we're going to give you an activity. We're going to give you some drawings, and you're going to have a quick look at location of smoke detectors for various design scenarios. And you'll pop this up onto the up onto a submission site a little bit later on. I'm just going to quickly show you the exercise. Actually, before I go there, I've made that available to you as a Word document and also as a PDF document. So I'm going to open the Word document because that might be a little bit easier for you to put notes on. And I think you can see coming up on the screen just there that there's a plan. I'm going to shrink that down just by, on the right hand side of all these Microsoft programs, there's a little arrow there, and it just collapses this big ribbon that you can see across the top here. And that just gives you a little bit more real estate so you can see a bit more. And so on here, what we have is a number of pages. I think there's 9, and we've got a house plan. First thing is to orient ourselves and look at what type of house it is. And I can see on the front here, there's a garage. You come in the front door, there's a bedroom there, walk-in robe, ensuite study there. Then from the garage, we've got a lounge room. We've got a bedroom here. We go through this door. We've got a dining room out the back. Oh, and media room, family room, and another couple of bedrooms there. So we've got a 1, 2, 3. We've got a 4-beddy, a couple of other rooms, al fresco out the side there. And if we go back to the requirements, it says here that smoke alarms must be located in Class 1A buildings in accordance with 3753 and 3755. This would be a 1A building, I would think you would agree. It's a separate type building. Looks like there's probably a site plan here somewhere, maybe. And so you can go through and have a look at that. I won't spend time on all of that now. So as we look at this particular building, we've got to make sure that we comply with that. We also have to comply with 3756, which 3786, which I thought I had open there, but maybe I haven't. You can get all the Australian standards up where you get your national construction code from, of course. So we have to comply with 3753 and 3755. So this is 3752. Let's go down and have a look. Just remember all that we have to do all these things, 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's see what the 3753 is. So 3753 for a 1A building, they must be located in any story containing bedrooms. Any bedrooms on that story? Yes. Every corridor or hallway associated with a bedroom. So in the corridor or the hallway, I think there's a corridor through there which accesses those bedrooms. So there's got to be one there. Or if there's no corridor or hallway in an area between, so that's not our problem there. Each another story not containing bedrooms. I think this is only single story. I haven't had a big look at it, but let's say it's only single story. So there's got to be smoke alarm in there. And then we have to comply with number 5, 37, I think it said here, comply with 3755. So we comply with 4 if we locate it correctly, and then we've got to comply with 5, which will be a clause down here, and it says installation of smoke alarms required must be installed on or near the ceiling in accordance with the following, where a smoke alarm is located. So you pretty much got to do A and B there. Okay. So let's go back up here and see what else we have to do. That's only one of the points that we have to do, and there's 4 of them. The second thing we have to do here is comply with AS 3786, except there. Okay, so that's got to comply with that. We've got to be powered by consumer mains source, obviously power, and it must be interconnected where there's more than one alarm. Okay, so that's interesting. We've got to have all of those 4 things that we've got to comply with for the building. So we already know now we've got to have one in here somewhere. And what we're going to do is let you do a little bit of research through there. You probably won't get all that finished tonight, but over the next little while, you're going to do a little bit of research and you're going to answer the little points there. Just draw a circle if you like. Just grab the insert button and grab a shape up the top here and grab yourself a little circle. We've got any circles here? There's looks like a bit of a circle. And if you think a smoke detector needs to be put here, then pop yourself a little circle in there. Okay, if you don't think it needs to go there, move it to where you think it does need to go. Okay, as an example, and that's one of your activities that you're going to go through tonight there that I've opened up for you. I'll show you the answer next week, but I'll just see how many people get that first. So that you're good with smoke detectors. You're going to need to read that code a little bit to do that. It's a little bit complicated, but read through and do the best you can, submit it, and we'll have a quick look at it. So now we're going to look at the NCC Volume 1 2019 and follow the term fire hose. I want to do this because it is quite different to what the old codes were. We're looking at Volume 1 because we don't really need fire hoses for houses, Class 1 and 2 buildings. That's probably just a garden hose. And I'm going to just grab the wording for that so I can pop that into the search engine there. And I want to show you what it says if I start at the top here, there, and just start searching for fire hose. I'm going to go through till I get to something that, so here we go, fire hose reels. This is in section E, and that's because right down the in volume 1, it's laid out quite a bit differently to volume 2. It's quite hard to navigate, actually. I find I still get confused with it. But in section E, we've got services and equipment, and this is where we've got fire hose reels that I mentioned. You can follow the little searches through there, or we can quickly go and have a look at this one. And if we look at the performance requirements, remember that's the overall statement about what has to happen, just a broad statement. It says a fire hose reel system must be installed to the degree necessary to allow occupants to safely undertake initial attack on a fire, appropriate to the size of the fire compartment. We could go and have a look at what that means. I'll let you do that. And the function and use of the building and any other fire system installed and the fire hazard. So that's the purpose of a fire hose reel. Okay, so we've got EP 1.1. If we keep on going down here, we're going to come to the verification methods, which is pretty technical actually, but so we're not quite so concerned with that, but we are concerned with the deemed to satisfy provisions. Sometimes that's inside a little box, I seem to recall, like that one there, and like this little box here. But anyhow, whatever happens, the deemed to satisfy provisions are the measurements and the exact Australian standards that we need to go to get the exact millimetres or specific information about how to do things. And so if I start searching for fire hose reels from there, we come to E1.4. Just make sure I went forward, so I should still be there. And I've come through to E1.4, and this tells us here that about fire hose reels. And this rule's changed in the last couple of years because they did a lot of study, which is a little bit old now because it's the new 2019 code embeds the old study that they did, because they studied fires and they found that people didn't want to touch the fire hose reels in units and places where they were because they felt they might be tampering with things that were there. So a lot of them just sat there without being used. So now they've changed their rules a little bit. And this is what we've got the latest rules in here in the 2019 one. So it says here, fire hose rules do not apply to class 2, 3, 5 buildings or class 4 part of a building or class 8 electricity network substation or that. A fire hose reel system must be provided to serve the whole of the building, this and that. A fire hose reel system must, etc., etc. So right up here, we've got A, B, C, D. D says they must be located internally, externally, or in combination to achieve a system coverage as specified in 2441. Okay, and there's quite a few other pieces of information there. It goes right down to G. Okay, where we've got to have all sorts of details there. So that's an example there about the fire hose reels. And I'm going to open up that chat for you to punch that in. And that's going to pretty much ask you what are the requirements for a fire hose? Briefly note the class of building that requires one. You should be able to work that through now from what I've just gone through. And I see we haven't got any more chats that I need to check on there. So if I duck down now to the next heading, which sorry, I didn't show you earlier because I didn't have that all quite ready for you. I just want to show you now a little bit about the bushfire regulations. And the first thing I want to say is this is like all of the code, but even more so after the events of last season, this is under review. All of the code is constantly being reviewed. And especially after we put one of the students' notes about some spelling errors and some word definitions in, hopefully they'll review it again after that, after we notify them. But the bushfire laws and the bushfire information is something that will be constantly being reviewed. And after this coronavirus and things have settled down, I'll guarantee there's some more information, some more reviews and things that are going on about that as well. I'm not sure if you've followed on the news, but there's been quite a bit of conversation about office space and how the trend, I know the New South Wales government, I'm pretty sure, had a trend towards all new office space would be fairly open, and it would be like where you hot desk, you go in and use whatever desk's available that day, and it was quite open, and that was kind of a trend. And I went into one of those modern offices in Wagga recently, and it looked a great place to work. You just carry your laptop in and put it down wherever there's a desk next to whoever you need to work with, and it was looked like a really good system for working. Some of that may change as this virus and research and things about the virus comes out, and it'll end up in maybe the 2020 National Construction Code or the 2021 or something. So let's have a quick look at some of this little one that I prepared for you of the new some of the new bushfire planning laws. And here's an HIA alert that came through to me recently. I know many of you will have received this because you're subscribing to HIA and MBA newsletters and other people as well. And so this is for your information, where it basically talks about how we're going to need to refer to the 3959 Australian Standard, which I think I had up there for you. That might have been what I showed you earlier there with the bushfire attack levels and things. And there's going to be some things that are a little bit different. You can see here they refer to PBP 06 and some of the different things which that would make you suspicious that might come from the National Construction Code. Okay, and the last thing that we want to look at here before we open things up is private bushfire shelters. And I've sent you a link through there to the Australian Building Codes Board. And if you were to have a look at all the documentation and all the research that occurs, there's a big push in Australia towards a lot of it to fit into the Australian Building Codes Board monitoring and onto their site. So you can type a search in up there for lots of different things, and they will have a lot of the documentation and things that will help guide us as building practitioners. And then if we download that PDF, which I already have here for you, somewhere along here, I'll check and see which one it is. That's the flood hazard one. That was the extreme weather events. That's the bushfire shelters one. Smoke detectors could have been. Anyway, we'll just grab that one again, and that should pop up there. There we go. Shrink it back a bit. I think there were some bookmarks for this one. So we've got private bushfire shelters, and that's the 2014 one. And you'll need this one so that you can access some of the activities and quizzes and things that are going to come up. So all the resources and things are up there for you. I'm pretty much going to stop talking there now. We can stop the recording. I'm just going to check if any questions and things need addressing. And I want to throw it open to particularly some of the other teachers that are out there, and it's particularly some of you who have been in these bushfire areas, because we're dealing with fire, or any of those areas, and just get your comments or things that you might be able to throw into the lesson for tonight so that we can all learn some things from there. So before I do that, Amy says, might be off topic, I'm interested in learning about external roof sprinkler systems. There's a mention of it in volume 1 in NCC, but it refers to buildings and atriums. Okay, let's have a look at Amy's question. A good question, Amy. I'm going to go straight to the, where's all my codes gone? Did I shut them all down? No, there they are. I'm just going to go straight to 1 second while I get all my screens back up again. There we go. We're looking at volume 1, roof sprinkler systems. I'll go to volume 1, which I've got up there, and I think you can all see that. I'll just move that over a little tiny bit. First thing I'll do probably is start at the beginning of the book. Go right to the beginning, make sure I'm in volume 1, and I'll type in there roof sprinkler systems and see what they say. Some of you might have a note up there about how many times that's mentioned, but let's go through and have a little bit of a look and see what it says, because I think your question particularly was, where do I find out information for a normal residential building? So does a normal residential building need it? We would have to go to volume 1 for that. And I'm pretty sure the answer would be no, because it's it would SPRINKLER, roof sprinkler. They don't even have those two words together listed there. They may not even have the word sprinkler in volume 1, because volume 1 has different requirements to volume 2. Oh, here's a sprinkler alarm switch. That's a definition. Residential sprinkler head is activated, so that's something not necessarily to do with fire. Let's go through and see what it says there. Here it's got 2118 automatic fire sprinkler systems. It mentions 2118 there. I'm just going to write that down so I can search through the code through here and see if it mentions 2118 anywhere. Let's just see if it's got that anywhere else. That's all to do with 2018. And that's a note FPAA. That could be an Australian standard, or that comes from some other document there. What was that previous one? Was FPAA, building with sprinkler typical method or solution. Here we've got 282. We're on page 570. Fire brigade intervention design scenario, fire safety verification method. Okay, where's, yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Sorry, the FPAA refers to the Fire Protection Association.
Thank you, Stuart. Stuart, would you like to address that question of Amy's? You'd be just the person for that.
Okay, Amy, with regards to, there is no Australian, they're not, it hasn't been referenced in the current NCC 2019 volume 2. However, there has been papers put out, like organisations like the FPAA, in light of the fires that happened over the November, Christmas, January, February period of this year and the end of last year, of which councils are adopting in interims until NCC updates it and actually references it in their documents.
Thank you very much for that. Does that help a little bit, hopefully, Amy? So that's the FPAA.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yep, so there's, thank you for that. So there's the FPAA. That's a commercial organisation that, if we go down here and look at who they are, they're going to, there's probably a contact us somewhere there, and they're going to do research and things. Lots of commercial organisations do this. There we go, contact. So that tells us details there from Melbourne. and there's usually an about us somewhere. You can look through there and you can see exactly who they are, and they're actually lots of organisations like that are referenced in the standards and the codes, because CSIRO, I want to show you that actually. CSIRO is an organisation that does a lot of research. Here they are here, and they used to do a lot of building research and all that type of thing, but a lot of it is outsourced now to different organisations. That's interesting. There's one there for bushfire, and they would build structures according to Australian standard that I showed you earlier, and they will write up the information, and that's why now if you build in one of those areas I showed you on the Wagga City Council site, you would have to have certain types of screens and all of that. So it's quite detailed, quite a bit of information, quite specific. The main thing you need to take away from this lesson is if it tells you to do something on the plans and the engineer's details are in the specifications, then do it. Anything else you'd like to add here about this topic, Stuart, or anyone else about fire? Any of the other teachers there?
I can just jump in, Adrian, and agree with the comment that you're saying about anything that are on the drawings, especially with how the climate was and how the fires were over Christmas. You don't want to be missing any of that. I know a current builder that I work with, or I deal with, and they actually get a fire consultant in for any bell rating, really. They just get someone in and they charge towards the job.
Thank you. Yeah, so there we go, member engagement potentially.
Stuart, do you have any examples? You've probably got some really good examples that the students might be interested in.
I'm going to try and get the information on a house that is right on the foreshore of Lake Conjola that I worked on about 18 months ago.
Okay, that'd be good.
Because they're in a FZ zone as well, like Amy's experienced in Fig Tree. But just doing a quick Google search then with regards to if you go on the ABCB Connect part of the website and you type in new, they've actually got listed new residential fire sprinkler requirements in the NCC, and they're actually showing how, as Adrian mentioned, how the FPAA documents have been referenced, and they've actually got a page there showing that on their web page there, talking about how they've adopted those sprinkler systems in their technical specifications. Whilst there's things like the Australian standard hasn't updated, these guys have got in early and have supported what the NCC wants.
Thank you very much for that. That's excellent. That's a big document there, or not, actually it's not a big document, but it's an 18-page document talking about fire sprinkler heads for domestic applications, so that's good. I wonder if I'll be interested to have a look at that. Do they talk about external sprinklers or internal sprinklers or things like that? So I imagine in a fire area, we definitely want to have that. In a bushfire area, we definitely want to have, they don't mention bush there or bushfire, so it must just be for internal fires, because on lots of people will put some sprinkler system on their roof and block the gutters up, so you've got a couple of inches of water in all the gutters and then your sprinklers just hose it down. But that's just anecdotal information, which means that's just things people have done and they survived a bushfire, but it might not be the reason they survived, and so that gets passed around as anecdotal information. But the Australian standard is the one that you've got to comply with, because they're the people who, the councils and the local certifiers are the ones who pass your building. Do we have any other questions tonight? I know a couple of people are keen to get onto the activities. Any other questions? So, all right, thank you very much, everybody. We'll meet again online on Monday night. Everything will be just as normal. So we've got Monday, Tuesday and Thursday. There are no more quizzes. But what I'm going to do in a moment is just, if you just hold your attention for one more second, I'm going to open up now for you the assessment. So you can see here I've gone right back to the front page for Applied Building Codes, and all of them are pretty much the same. So I'm going to open up now for you the assessments. Assessment 3. Obviously, you will have had to have acknowledged the unit assessment guide, which I think most people have. And this is your assessment. There's lots of words there, But the thing you're interested in is this document down the bottom. So I'll just open it up for you and show you. Okay, here we go. It's pretty much the same wording as what's in the front of the assignment on the Moodle, but you need to go through now and save that document in your own name. So I'll just give you a good demonstration of that. I'm going to save that here on my TAFE. Oh, I'm using a OneDrive now because I might be at home if we crash. So good idea to save things because you don't really know where you'll be, or certainly for us, we need to make sure we save things somewhere on a cloud because that'll be kept nice and safe for us. I think that was last year's one, so I better put a 2021. So I'm saving this on the cloud somewhere where it's a long way secured from the coronavirus. If you have a document that you don't want to lose, then just email it to yourself, WOONGONG, and that pretty much puts it on the cloud, and then you can access it again. So I'm going to just open myself up one here called Codes, because there's a possibility that down the track we might be operating from our homes, just like Brett is. And so I've saved that there, then I can start to do things with it. And this is the assignment that you work on. So because I've saved that, I'd probably call that my own name. Up the top here, I'd put my name on it here. Okay, and then you're going to go through and answer all those questions. That's pretty much all you do with that one. So you can see there's 2 pages. And in this particular case, you apply fire requirements incorporating passive and active. So if you look at, that's the purpose of it. And this one, you identify the class of a building, include visual footage. So in that particular case, I would expand that out. And if you just hit enter twice, you'll get plenty of room to type in, my building is class 1, here's a picture of it, and all those sorts of things. Brief explanation of the building, refer to acceptable construction within the volume. So in my particular case, I've got a 3D virtual home here for you to have a look at. Here it is here. I just Googled 3D homes, and Bentley Homes have got a 3D home, and I'm going to go back to the front door and walk through as in relation to my assignment, because so if I come in, I think that's the front door. I'll just skim up through here. And if I look at my assignment, one of the things it says is refer to acceptable construction within the volume. Ensure you reference this from the NCC, and then I need to see whether it complies. So for my particular house here, the Pinnacle 430, I know that I need to have a smoke detector. So what do I see when I look up in the roof? There's a smoke detector right up there. Okay. Oh, I think I got lost then. There's a smoke detector, and because I have to have one on each level. If I go up the level here, I think I can walk up the stairs there. Maybe I've got to go that way. If I walk up the stairs, I should see something up the top here. It's probably not going to be there's one right there. Okay, so there's a smoke detector. So I'd take a quick picture of that. If you're on a Windows computer, you can push Alt-Shift-S, and then you can take a picture of it. So that's just done a screen grab of that, and I can go back to my Word document here, and I can just pop that in there. So there's my little picture of my for my assignment, and I'd just put a note there. This is at the top of the stairs on first level. There you go. Now, of course, I've got to go to the standards and reference where I got that from. So I've got to go back. I'd have to go back to volume 2, which I'll just get them all back here. I'd have to go back to the part that talks about fire. I'd have to go back to the part that tells me all about that and what I've got to have inside the building. I'm not going to do all that now, but pretty much you just work your way through your assignment like that and answering it. And then I go to a class 2 building, and then there's a fire safety questionnaire. Now, I can tell you from experience last year, lots of students submitted this and they hadn't read everything fully, and it had to be returned, and they didn't get a quick response. Okay. Yes, Ashley, I will very soon. Just listen to us for a couple more minutes and that'll save you and us a lot of hassle trying to get the assignments done correctly. So for this one, you need to read that real carefully and make sure that you answer that correctly. Okay, fire safety requirements. And then you need to look here and you'll find the code doesn't actually say a smoke alarm is passive or active anymore. It doesn't say what's passive or active, but just use your common sense and do a bit of a search for what does the word active and passive mean. And we'll talk a bit more about that on Monday. And then define that term there, answer these little short questions here, and that's your assignment for tonight. Okay, and that'll last you for the rest of this unit as we go through. So hopefully that answers everybody's questions. If you've got any more, just definitely yell out. Otherwise, we can stop the recording, and I'm going to go through and open everything up for you, and we'll sit here and help you as much as you need help.
That's great, Agent. Can I just jump in?
Yeah, go.
I think, could everyone go back and just do that form? It's just a bit of a feedback form with relation to how you're feeling and how everything's going. I'm going to share it